You have tried everything, and that belly is still there, and that is not your fault. Most people are fighting the wrong enemy, using the wrong weapons, on the wrong battlefield. You can do 1,000 sit-ups a day and that stubborn belly will laugh at every single one of them. You can survive on salads and willpower for weeks and still watch your stomach push against your shirt every morning. You can run until your joints scream for mercy and wake up the next day looking exactly the same. The problem was never your effort, your discipline, or your dedication. The problem is that nobody told you what you're actually fighting. Deep inside your abdomen, wrapped tightly around your vital organs, lives a hidden enemy that most people never even know exists. It is not the soft, squishy fat you can grab with your fingers. That fat is almost harmless compared to what's hiding beneath it. The real threat is called visceral fat, and it does not behave like normal fat at all. Visceral fat behaves more like a parasite than stored energy. It wraps itself around your liver, squeezes against your pancreas, and presses into your heart from the inside. Unlike regular fat that simply sits there storing energy, visceral fat is metabolically aggressive. It actively releases inflammatory chemicals directly into your bloodstream every single day. It destroys your hormone balance, drives insulin resistance, and keeps your entire body locked in a state of chronic internal stress. Here is the terrifying part that most doctors never warn you about: you can be completely slim on the outside and still carry a lethal amount of visceral fat inside. Doctors have a name for this condition. They call it TOFI, thin outside, fat inside, and research shows it can be more dangerous than visible obesity. The soft fat on your arms and thighs is just a cosmetic inconvenience. Visceral fat is a biological weapon turned against your own body. So how do you know which one you are actually dealing with right now? Stand up, press your hand firmly against your stomach, and pay close attention to what you feel. If your belly feels soft, squishy, and moves easily under your fingers, that is mostly subcutaneous fat, the kind that affects how you look more than how long you live. But if your belly pushes outward, feels tight, firm, or hard, like there is internal pressure building from the inside, that is visceral fat pressing against your abdominal wall. That hardness is not muscle, that firmness is your organs under stress, and that pressure is your metabolism silently asking for help. This is exactly why years of dieting often produces nothing but frustration, because visceral fat does not respond to calorie punishment the way people think it does. In fact, severe calorie restriction can make visceral fat more stubborn by spiking your stress hormones and telling your body to hold on tighter to its deepest reserves. To remove visceral fat, you do not attack it randomly with exhaustion and starvation. You dismantle it by cutting off the precise biological conditions that keep it alive. Japanese researchers spent years studying exactly this, and what they discovered completely changed the way the scientific world thinks about belly fat. The first discovery was about oxidative stress, a condition inside your body that visceral fat feeds on like fuel. Think of oxidative stress like rust forming inside a machine. When your cells are overloaded with excess energy for too long, they start producing unstable molecules called free radicals. These free radicals damage tissue, corrupt cellular signals, and create the exact internal chaos that visceral fat needs to survive and expand. The more oxidative stress you carry inside your body, the stronger, deeper, and more stubborn your visceral fat becomes. So the first and most critical step is not to burn fat, it is to remove the environment that makes visceral fat impossible to lose. And the most powerful tools for doing this are not found in a pharmacy or a supplement store, they are found in the color of your food. Carotenoids are the natural pigments that give plants their deep, vivid colors, the orange in carrots, the red in bell peppers, the dark green in spinach and kale. These pigments are not just decoration on your plate, they are biological signals that communicate directly with your DNA. A landmark double-blind study conducted in Japan tested exactly what happens when adults simply increase their intake of carotenoid-rich vegetables like carrots and cabbage for 8 weeks. There was no extreme dieting, no calorie counting, no added exercise, just a strategic increase in colorful plant foods. The results were extraordinary. The carotenoids neutralized free radicals, dramatically reduced oxidative stress, and then did something even more remarkable. They activated the specific genes in the human body responsible for fat burning while simultaneously suppressing the genes responsible for fat storage. Visceral fat began to measurably decrease, not because people ate less, but because they changed the biological environment inside their bodies. This is why food color matters infinitely more than calorie counting when it comes to visceral fat specifically. Beige foods, bread, pasta, crackers, white rice, feed the oxidative environment that keeps visceral fat alive and growing. Vibrant foods, sweet potatoes, bell peppers, carrots, spinach, squash strip away the conditions visceral fat depends on to survive. Every meal without color is a meal that protects your visceral fat. Every meal loaded with deep, rich color is a direct biochemical attack against it. This is not about eating less, this is about eating like your biology understands what it actually needs to function at its highest level. Once you reduce oxidative stress through carotenoids, visceral fat becomes vulnerable for the first time, and that is exactly when the second strategy delivers its most powerful blow. Now let's talk about what you are drinking, because this is the step that most people completely overlook and it changes everything. There is a specific drink that acts like a biological key, unlocking fat cells that would otherwise stay closed and resistant no matter what you do. Most people have heard the claim that green tea burns fat, and most people have dismissed it as marketing hype, but it is not hype, it is chemistry. Green tea contains a compound called EGCG, a powerful polyphenol that exists in high concentrations in quality, properly prepared green tea. Think of your fat cells as having locked doors that only open under very specific conditions. EGCG is the molecule that picks those locks open. It stimulates fat oxidation by activating your nervous system and encouraging your body to release stored fat into your bloodstream to be used as energy. But that is only half of what EGCG does. It also blocks a digestive enzyme called lipase, the enzyme responsible for breaking down dietary fat in your gut so it can be absorbed. When lipase is inhibited, significantly less fat from your meals enters your bloodstream, meaning you burn more stored fat and absorb less new fat simultaneously. Multiple double-blind, placebo-controlled studies have confirmed that people who consume EGCG-rich green tea show consistent, significant reductions in visceral fat over time without extreme dietary changes. But here is where most people destroy their own results before they even begin. They buy bottled green tea from a supermarket shelf and call it done. Bottled green tea is not green tea, it is sugar water wearing a healthy label, and sugar is one of the primary drivers of visceral fat accumulation in the liver. What you need instead is matcha or sencha, because with these forms you consume the entire tea leaf, not just a weak infusion of it. That means dramatically higher concentrations of EGCG, enough to actually trigger the biological responses that the research confirms. There is also a powerful natural synergy working inside quality green tea that most people never consider. Green tea contains a moderate amount of caffeine alongside the EGCG. The caffeine stimulates your body to release stored fat into circulation, and the EGCG simultaneously prevents that released fat from being reabsorbed and stored again. One compound lights the fire, the other keeps the door open. It is a controlled, sustained biological burn rather than a chaotic metabolic crash. So now you have weakened visceral fat from two precise angles. You removed its oxidative fuel with carotenoids, and you unlocked its cells while blocking new absorption with EGCG. But there is one final piece of this strategy, and it is the most misunderstood element in the entire conversation about belly fat movement. Not punishment, not suffering, not hours of cardio that destroys your joints and spikes your cortisol, the right movement at the right intensity at the right frequency. Most people believe that exercise is simply a calorie-burning tool. Run more, sweat more, suffer more, and eventually the fat disappears. That logic fails completely when applied to visceral fat, because visceral fat does not respond to punishment, it responds to precise metabolic signaling. A massive meta-analysis examining over 100 exercise studies identified one specific protocol that produced results that shocked the researchers. Participants exercised only 2 to 3 times per week, each session lasting approximately 45 minutes, no marathon training, no daily punishment, no extreme output. But here was the key detail that separated this protocol from everything else: they worked at exactly 75% of their maximum capacity. Not too easy where the body feels no reason to change, and not so extreme that cortisol spikes and internal stress increases, right in the precise metabolic sweet spot. After just 8 weeks, body weight barely moved, the scale showed almost no change, but visceral fat dropped by nearly half. Insulin sensitivity improved dramatically at the same time, pulling participants back from the edge of prediabetes and metabolic disease without a single medication. This is why the scale is one of the most misleading tools you can use when targeting visceral fat. Visceral fat melts long before the mirror shows any visible change. So what does 75% intensity actually feel like in real life, without lab equipment or heart rate monitors? Use what researchers call the talk test. If you can sing comfortably while exercising, you are going too easy and your body has no reason to change. If you are gasping so hard that forming a single sentence feels impossible, you have gone too far and you are now creating the cortisol spike that feeds visceral fat. The sweet spot is when you can speak in complete sentences but you would genuinely rather not, slightly breathless, aware of the effort, but fully in control. That feeling, that specific zone, is where visceral fat receives the biological signal that stored internal energy must be mobilized and used. And here is the most important distinction that separates movement from dieting as a long-term strategy. Dieting creates a ceiling, but movement does not. With extreme calorie restriction, your metabolism adapts, slows down, and fat loss plateaus. Your body fights back against starvation with every biological tool it has. But with consistent movement at the right intensity, the response is dose-dependent. More movement equals more visceral fat loss with no metabolic ceiling in sight. The strategy is never to starve your body smaller, it is to fuel it intelligently and let targeted movement create the internal conditions for visceral fat to disappear. Now let's bring all 3 pieces together into a system you can begin using immediately, because precision beats extremes every single time. Step 1 is color. Look at your plate right now, and if the majority of what you see is beige, brown, or pale, you are actively feeding your visceral fat with every single meal. Add at least 1 deeply colored plant to every meal: carrots, sweet potatoes, spinach, bell peppers, squash, and treat it not as a side dish but as your primary biological weapon. Step 2 is your drink. Replace one coffee or sugary beverage each day with real matcha or sencha green tea, prepared properly with no sugar and no shortcuts. Step 3 is movement done with precision, 3 to 4 sessions per week, 45 minutes each, at the intensity where you can talk but genuinely prefer not to. Consistency in these 3 steps does not just reduce visceral fat, it rewires the internal biological environment that created it in the first place. Your body is not broken, it is not fighting you, and it is not beyond repair. It is adaptive, responsive, and waiting for the right signals. Stop punishing it with starvation and exhaustion, and start sending it the precise biological instructions it needs to release what it has been holding on to. Because when you finally remove visceral fat, you are not just changing how your stomach looks in the mirror, you are changing how long and how powerfully you live.